The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on our live shows.
Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of This Week in Guns is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to This Week in Guns. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and Patriot Patch Company.
And this show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Sean Herron, and it is my pleasure, as always, to introduce our panel tonight. First up, we've got a veteran, but also a veteran of the show. He's a Second Amendment advocate, professional rabble-rouser, author of American Insurgent, and host of the Matter of Facts podcast. His name is Phil Rabelais. How's it going, man?
Going fine, man. But how about yourself?
Doing good. Glad to have you back, buddy. The quarantine treating you all right?
Yeah, we're rolling with the punches like everybody else.
All right, good stuff, man. Next up, we got two guys, one room. First up, you know him from CN Arsenal. Did I say CN Arsenal? Sorry. CN Arsenal, primer, YouTube videos, historian, everything else in the universe. His name is Matthias. What's up, man?
Hey, I brought my attorney because the last couple times it came on your show, it got a little heated.
Honestly, it's probably not a bad idea. And that guy sitting next to him is Matthew LaRosiere. He's the director of legal policy at Firearms Policy Coalition and a shit poster. What's up, man? How's it going?
I've been outed. Great to see you, man.
Glad to have you guys. If Matthias says anything that's against the rules or whatever, I don't know. Just plead. What is it like? Plead the 14th Amendment. I don't really know. I don't know. I know
we got all the implements to plead the second in here, so I think we're good to go.
Perfect. All right, guys, go check out Patriot Patch Company. That's patriotpatch.co. Patch of the Month Club is awesome. And also Second Call Defense. If you carry a gun, have a gun at home, and ever have to use it, everything that happens after that is a little bit crazy for everybody. So if you do those things, go check them out. And just look at their plan, see what they have to offer. They make sure that you have legal representation, and they even pay damages if you lose. So it's firearmsradio.tv/SCD, and you can look at all the different plans and programs. Let's get right into it. There's tons of stuff happening in the world right now, but The Truth About Guns has their 10 best quarantine movies for gun guys. I don't like any of the stuff in this list. It's Taken, Skyfall, No Country for Old Men, The Matrix, John Wick, Jack Reacher, Full Metal Jacket, Enemy at the Gates, Dirty Harry, Collateral. I like some of those movies, but I'm like, I don't know. Some of them are okay, but Matthias, Matthew.
These are defined as gun guy movies, right?
I guess, yeah.
I'm not a huge movie buff, but the only one that stood out in my mind was Enemy at the Gates. Was the one that a lot of people are inspired by to start collecting. But otherwise, those feel like movies with guns.
Yeah. No Country for Old Men is an interesting inclusion.
Yeah, because it's not a gun.
It's a gun, a captive bolt pistol.
Yeah, you know how we all run around with those.
Yeah.
I kind of want to, but yeah, I don't know. I didn't think that maybe John Wick, because it's like 3-gun the movie, but I don't know. I didn't really feel a whole lot about that. Phil, what did you think? Was there anything that you would recommend instead?
Yeah, Heat.
Yeah, Heat. Actually, yeah, good.
Kilmer. I mean, look. Anybody that hasn't seen Heat, that is like, they should show that in film school for the correct, proper way to film a gunfight. Obviously, somebody did their homework on things like small unit tactics, leapfrogging, tactical reloads. But it's a wonderful film. It's beautifully shot, and the bank heist scene is legendary. And the fact that it's not included in this list is odd, considering some of the things that were included.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like they just Googled gunshots in movies or something, and then they just put the first 10 results. I'm
not sure. I mean, some of this stuff, I don't know if it's gun guy films, but I mean, Dirty Harry, I'll give you that one. Enemy of the Gates is great. Full Metal Jacket, I'm a Stanley Kubrick nerd, so I'll go with that. Some of this stuff, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Matrix is maybe like a gun guy film if you're a gun guy smoking PCP in your living room. I don't know.
If you're making a gun guy movie list, I think we start to be clued in on the idea that it's supposed to be a story of a man and his gun.
Mm-hmm. There you go. What about Shooter with Mark Wahlberg? I mean, that's kind of a gun.
I can tell you, I can't watch Zulu without holding my Martini Henry.
That's actually a good movie.
Like literally, whenever I see it on AMC or whenever it's on, I go and I get it.
James A in the chat or in the live comments just said Tremors and Heat. Really not on there? I agree. Tremors is pretty
Tremors
good.
is a gun movie.
Tremors is another good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I hate this article. Actually, I just brought it up because it was a good example of blog spam.
But see, Tremors is an interesting one because like Tremors is one of those movies come from the prepper world where like most people when they're young they look at Burt Gummer, the crazy prepper in the movie, and they think he's completely nuts. And then you get to my age and you aspire to become him. So
I know.
you know,
You're like, turns out he was the only one that knew what the hell was going on the entire time.
it turns out that the crazy SOB with the room full of MREs and more guns in the National Guard was the one who was on the right path.
They'd all be dead without Burt.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's funny because when I was growing up, I was like, man, that guy's just like my uncle, and now I'm like, man, that guy's just like me. Did you guys know? Did someone drop out of the Democratic race? I don't remember. Did that happen? I don't recall. Matt.
The economy went up like 5%.
Yeah, no, I don't know about that, but I do notice the stock market like shot up by like 6%.
Yeah, in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, so that was fascinating.
It was.
And I mean, if I were a person who were running for political office and I withdrew and I saw that happen, it would make me feel like really weird.
I mean, it's just more of the white patriarchy, right? It's like
It must be that.
yeah, I'm sure that people are assuming, oh, it's just so all the fat cats can get richer. But yeah, he dropped out. So I know that after his first presidential run, and we're talking about Bernie Sanders, for those that don't know, after his first presidential run, his net worth went way up. Was that? I mean, what did they do with all the money that they raised for their campaign when they turned off their campaign?
I don't know, but he bought a mansion afterwards. So
Barely a millionaire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna run for office so I can buy like a Corolla or something.
On the plus side, Congress got a raise.
Yeah.
Right. What was it? $25 million for like raises and administrative stuff.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Mhm.
Practice social distancing. Go hunting. Here's another article from the Truth About Guns, but I don't mind some of them. There's a lot of hunting down in the nation. A lot of state parks being closed, things like that. Hunting's been on a downward trend in the United States for quite a while now, and with the quarantine, it seems like hunting would be a great thing to do. Go out in the woods, kind of by yourself, track animals. Hunt them legally. Do all the conservation stuff that's associated with that. But so much are being closed down. A lot of areas are being closed down. A lot of out-of-state permits are not being issued. Like I get that a little bit. They don't want to hold. I don't know. I'm not sure where I come down on it, but it's not that surprising. But I think that people hunting would be kind of a good thing. Bill, what do you think?
I mean, I'm kind of weirded out by this because I don't have a direct dog in this fight because I'm not a hunter personally. I am an avid camper and hiker though, and like my own state, Louisiana, shut down all the state. They shut down the state parks. You can still go to them, but you can't actually camp in them. And my point of view was, I'm like, wouldn't I be social distancing a little bit better if I were the only person in a campsite? And like the nearest campsite's 20 feet away from me. So I'm well more than 6 feet away. I'm getting plenty of sunshine and fresh air, which they said was supposed to be okay for us. Yeah. But they shut down the campsites. I don't know. I mean, some of the response to the coronavirus, I think, like we can debate whether or not it was justified, and some of this just starting to seem capricious.
Yeah. Oatman and Law Dude, what do you guys think?
It's kind of an interesting thing because what is the government's duty in keeping those things open, right? Because when you think it's a park, it's just like a plot of land, but they do kind of have a duty to provide for safety and security and maintenance of the park. And so, I guess the main concern would be if we've sent our park boys home, right, because they're not essential, then who's there to make sure you don't get knifed or poisoned or whatever? But like, that's how much responsibility when you want to take when you go hunting. But
so I think what he's saying is that you and I would wander in a national park camping, and we would say, yeah, I'm bringing everything I need in here. I'm going to be properly hydrated and fed, and I'm going to be armed, so I don't have to worry about animal attacks or people attacks. But there's a lot of people out there that are just like, Dude, like Disneyland, I'm gonna show up and there's gonna be like free water and free food or whatever, or there's gonna be a snack bar. Where's the snack bar? You know, and like you have to kind of account for the people that are gonna sue you later when their dumb cousin showed up and just like screwed around in the woods.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that we're screwing with natural selection. Is that like the long and short of it?
We're balancing liability for people who will go and engage in these activities.
By the way,
listen, that's lawyer speak. I'm not a lawyer.
if you have the services running,
right,
you can say, look, we had all these services and they dodged the services and still managed to die. So you're like, we had a safety net. It's not our fault that they got through it somehow. But if you have no net whatsoever, then it's like, well, you should have had a net.
So yeah, I guess to put it like really shortly, there wouldn't be a problem if national parks were just national parks, right? But they go around and do all of this stuff and provide all of these services. And then once everybody's used to that, then they're going to be thinking, oh, well, if we're not doing this, if we're not maintaining it and not keeping out, the knife fighters or whatever, then we're just going to shut it down. But if it's shut down, that also means no one's there to enforce these things. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, but so I'm looking at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it does look like they're essential. I don't see any closures or that they're not having the park rangers out there and stuff because if they aren't there, like who's there to ticket people when they misuse land? But look, they do have a COVID-19 update page, and it says that they are. Yeah, it doesn't look like they're closed down, so they're still doing their jobs. They're just doing social distancing, avoiding overcrowding, and exercising good hygiene. So. I mean, it looks like they're still working. I guess we're just not allowed to use the public land. I don't know. Seems weird.
I don't know what that means.
To be fair, it might just be a bunch of people working for the government that have finally been given an excuse to be actually misanthropic. Like, oh, we can just do what we always wanted to do, but now we can do it out loud.
True. Next story. District Court says bump stock ban may be unconstitutional. This came out April 1st, April Fool's Day. It was a district court. So this is for the Gettys versus Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco in the DC Circuit.
Our case.
No, it's got to be the NRA, right? They're the ones that are expecting.
You should check the lawsuit.
In that case, do you know anything about this, Matt?
No.
Oh no, why would I know about that?
Please tell us what happened. What was this district court, and what did they decide, and what happened, and how does
so there's a lot of different cases going back and forth. This is like basically they're saying federal government, you have to actually like follow the law. They're not. We haven't had a ruling yet. We haven't had a favorable decision, but we're starting to hear rumblings. Basically, so just to put it simply, there's a bunch of steps you have to follow when you're evaluating whether a government action is constitutional. First step, is there a valid source of power in the Constitution? Then you go through, did it take too much? Did it do it in the right way? But for the past few decades, they've just been skipping step one and just assuming that the government has the power to do everything.
Do we have the authority to do this?
Exactly.
And you're supposed to check yes or no.
Right.
And so it's like the underwear gnomes are just like, all right, let's go to step 2. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, did you fill out step 1?
Right.
Step 2.
Yeah, and usually they just get away with it.
Right.
Because they just say, oh, interstate commerce, but this isn't that. So it's, I don't know, they're actually holding them to standards that we don't usually see applied, which is exciting. And I think we should view it with cautious optimism.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Phil, before I go to you, I just want to say, so this is Judge Starr in the Northern District of Texas. And this all does have to do with like police power and stuff like that. And there's in Judge Starr's writings here, it says, the federal government here raised the talisman of police power 31 times in its motion to dismiss and an additional 19 times in its reply. This seemed unusual to the court because the court had thought the police powers were power reserved for the states, not for the federal government. Fearful the court was wrong, it turned to the first place one should always turn to with such questions. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, enumerates the powers of the people gave to the federal government at our nation's founding: the tax power, the borrowing power, the commerce power, the naturalization power, the bankruptcy power, the power to coin money, the postal power, the maritime power, and the war power. None of these powers is the police power. It felt like a pretty snarky response, which I love. But Phil, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I mean, since you've taken a lot of my the steam out of me already by quoting most of this,
my bad.
I mean, I could just say no, duh, and we can move on. But
No. We've just read the whole thing, and we've had somebody who was working on it. Now you tell us about it, please.
No, I mean, I'm not going to editorialize on this. I'm just going to say that, like, y'all are cautiously optimistic. I am completely cynical when it comes to government admitting they're wrong. And I'm also equally cynical about, even if the courts determine that this is unconstitutional, I have no faith that it will actually be reversed. And I only take that point of view because of U.S. v. Miller, which is a court case I love to bring up for people that didn't pay attention to it. I mean, it was 60 years before I was born. But I mean, in U.S. v. Miller, the argument was basically raised by the government in an attempt to defend the National Firearms Act that we could defend any and all firearms that did not have a military purpose. That was the justification for NFA managing to stand. And now here we are all these years later, and now they're banning everything under the sun that is or is not useful for a military or militia. They're banning full autos. They ban silencers. They're trying to ban semi-autos. They've tried to kick the legs out from underneath ARs all this number of times, and they're completely ignoring U.S. v. Miller to do that. So I guess my point of view is, at some point it's like, okay, if you want to take and ban bump stocks because it allows a semi-auto to shoot like a machine gun, which is stupid because we all know that's not how that works, fine. Go back to U.S. v. Miller, where it says if it has a military purpose, it is protected by the Second Amendment and it cannot be regulated, and unleash machine guns. And then you can have all the damn bump stocks after that. I will third pin my AR tonight if you repeal that stupid law.
Well, if you're a bold man, there's always Google and a drill press. But I mean, let me just push back a little bit. Miller is an interesting and often misunderstood case. I mostly agree with your reading of it, but let me push back on you something there. Are machine guns banned?
Oh, if you want to get super technical, I suppose not.
That's the thing. Back then, when they passed the NFA, they wanted to ban handguns. They wanted to regulate handguns. And that didn't come out because they understood that handguns were super effective. That came out under political pressure.
Yep.
They didn't ban any weapons, not even machine guns, rocket launchers, or anything, because they didn't believe they had the constitutional power to do so even then.
What did they do?
They hyper turbo regulated them, right?
So in other words, they utilized the power of taxation to enact backdoor gun control, right?
Which we have
legally not supposed to ever happen.
Right, of course, I'm 100% with you, but we have new precedent that says you cannot sin tax the exercise of a right. So, I mean, I'm actually kind of stoked about the way some of these things are developing. And I mean, I think you're right. We do need to revisit Miller and also revisit the militia clause, because militias are a core protected purpose of the Second Amendment. And if you were going to form a state militia, which is something that every state had a law, like a militia act, before the ratification of the Constitution, it's clear that you need to have effective military-grade firepower to be able to form a local militia.
Yep. And I'll concede, they didn't ban. They de facto banned.
Right. No, well, that comes later, though. So you have this taxation issue, and then what you do is you turn the screw on that until it becomes an effective ban. And this is something Matt and I have talked about a lot lately, and I'm hoping that it's weird because, I'm a historian, I have an apolitical show, but there is something I've noticed the more I get into my work, and he and I have been talking about it a lot lately. We're even trying to find a term for it. But it's this thing where you have the written law, you have the understood law, but then you have this sort of echoing, reflected FUD-lore version of law where people are like, they're repeating things that sound true. Mm-hmm. And you get in these situations where you end up with we've all been in the situation where an FFL will not receive a gun unless it was shipped by an FFL. There's nothing in the law for that, but we've all seen it. And what it is this myth that got in their head and it won't come out. And then they go, well, I don't care. I'm a private business. I'm going to do it this way. Well, you get a whole generation of people doing that. And next thing you know, it can become the law without ever being written down because everybody starts doing it. And then in administrative circles, they just go, well, yeah, you got to do that. Mm-hmm. And finally, 100 years later, somebody goes back and says, that was never written that way. And well, we've been doing it. So, no, we're not changing that.
Or they can just sneak it in and actually enact it at that point. Right. Which is why I'm very forceful about, I always object when people say machine guns are banned, because if we accept that machine guns are banned, they will be. So yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. The other one, if you think about 3-step rules, I've never seen one, but I'm always hearing about them, right?
What's the 3-step rule?
People like in a lot of southeastern states, carrying in your car, you generally don't need, there's a general exemption. It's not considered carrying to have a firearm in your vehicle if it's not like readily accessible, which kind of means on your belt. So everybody always says, oh, well, there's a 3-step process to be that. And that's like total dog. Like,
in other words, you would have to like reach, unlock, open, and pull.
Oh, I
I'm
see.
following. That is very foreign to me because my state actually has a specific legal exemption that specifically states carrying a firearm inside of your vehicle is a constitutionally protected activity. Basically, your vehicle is an extension of your home. If I can own a firearm in my home, I can have it in my vehicle, and it states that specifically.
Right.
Like, to make it really apparent, you cannot arrest a person for having a gun in their car. Period.
I think ours says integral fastener. So arguably a Crown Royal bag would work, but it has an integral fastener.
Ours it's an extension of our home, so we can have it in our belt, concealed on the seat. Doesn't matter.
As long as it's in your vehicle. I've actually had to argue this out with police officers though, because like I've gone to pick up my kid from school,
Waving it around.
Well, no. I lock it up in my vehicle, but I've had police officers tell me dead serious, like, oh, yeah, that's a violation of law. And I'm like, no, it's not. Well, it's a gun-free zone. I'm like, but it's in my vehicle. Mm-hmm. The law specifically says that the gun-free zone cannot preclude me from exercising constitutional protected protected activities, such as having a firearm completely contained in your motor vehicle. And it uses that text specifically to make sure it couldn't be misinterpreted that way. But to your point about people thinking something is the law when it isn't, there's a lot of law enforcement officers out there that I've had to argue that point with.
Mm-hmm. You'd be shocked to hear this, but the government actually sometimes breaks and misapplies the law.
No.
So true. What about Brighton, Colorado? The guy playing at the park with his daughter and his wife, the 3 of them alone and unlawfully detained. That's a good one.
I would own a piece of that town after that was over.
He's going to. They admitted publicly that they were wrong, invited him in so they could apologize to him. He refused, which
don't care.
His attorney telling him, "Nah, don't bother. We're gonna own."
There will be an apology,
but
it will have consequence.
Shaped like a police station.
Shaped like a check.
I want that police station. I'm gonna put curtains up.
Yeah.
But I guess that's my point, just to say oops, our bad is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
The old saying, a right delayed is a right denied. When you unlawfully arrest a person that hasn't violated the law, I'm sorry, does not cover the problem.
Mm-mm.
I want to see officers fired. I want to see people retrained. I want to pick the curtains on the police station. I want to make this hurt because I want y'all to remember this experience and not do it again.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to make it hurt, right? Imagine if like regular, well, hold on. What if regular people were held responsible for their actions? Like, what if I stole from his wallet and then I had to pay him back if he brought me to the court of law? That would be wild, right? Now imagine if we also applied that same standard to police officers, where if they violate the law, you can recover against them. Wouldn't that be cool?
Oh, that'd be awesome. But
then they never enforce anything.
Maybe they wouldn't enforce anything stupid. Qualified immunity needs to be like put on a pyre and pushed into the ocean and satellite.
I
love having another libertarian on the show.
I brought my friend to the show.
Hi.
Hi. Let's see. Next story. Oral arguments in the California magazine ban case went forward in the 9th Circuit. So you guys may remember they had Freedom Week in California, allowing them to kind of get all the. Is this another one of yours, Matt?
We were involved. Yeah. Freedom Week was pretty cool.
Freedom Week was pretty awesome. On April 2nd, a 3-judge panel from the 9th Circuit heard oral arguments in the same case. The district court had decided the outright ban of magazines with a capacity of more than 10 rounds violated the Second Amendment. This was written by hero Judge Roger T. Benitez. They had Freedom Week. Then what was there? There was what did they put in place that stopped that?
So it was interesting. Like, so Freedom Week enjoined enforcement of that order and so that law. So you could, there were people, individuals, were shipping in absolute ape loads of magazines, just like as many as like all over the country, and there's literally nothing they could do about it. And so, but then because Benitez knew that the panel was gonna like slap him, So he temporarily stayed his order staying the law. So it wound up, it should have lasted a lot longer. It should have lasted for months and months and months and months. But there was just so much pressure from the panel because they knew like they were beating down. So that was the Freedom Week wound up being a hard compromise.
Now, doesn't that ultimately end up in a weird situation where they can't, like, before you would know if some component had existed before that happened because certain things didn't come into manufacture until later. So now it's like certain magazine styles, you can't identify whether it came in that week or not,
right? Because
they're undated.
So that's the thing with, like, have you guys ever seen a Glock with the U cut in the magazine?
Mm-mm.
Those are, so if a Glock's the back of a Glock magazine is a U instead of like a trapezoidal shape, it was made before 1992. So these magazines go for preposterous money on Gunbroker because they're legal in Massachusetts and legal in other states that had a cutoff. And so basically,
or at least arguably,
right.
Because
so,
they might not currently their law might say you can't have that come in right now, but there'd be no way for somebody to prove that they hadn't walked.
Well, so in some states it's like if the mag wasn't owned prior to this date, but then in California it was like lawfully possessed. So then now because of this, anything that existed last year possibly could have been lawfully possessed at that time.
It'd be hard to pin anybody down.
Yes,
unless they do what cops do in like the vast majority of cases and just get a confession out of you. Right.
Yes. So they were talking basically about how Heller applied in this with the 3-judge panel and talking about they were going down to the question when asked if the ban could be extended from a 10-round ban to a 1-round ban. Echeverria thought that might be unconstitutional, and that is actually the appealing attorney for the state of California. So where does this put us in this situation, Matt?
I think what this shows us is that there is no principle to a magazine restriction at all. Magazine restrictions are like speed limits. There's like, what is the principle difference, right, between a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit and a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit? It's just a number. And so what this is showing is they're like, 10 rounds, that protects the Constitution because, and they won't give any actual reason, right? But because we're hunting whitetail and skeet shooting. But then it's, well, if 1 round violates the Constitution, that must mean that there's some principle at play, right? You must be recognizing that there's a principle. And what the principle is, announced in Heller, is anything that is in common lawful use at any given time is constitutionally protected.
Oh, this is the PSA argument.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's, I don't know if you guys know about it, but Palmetto State Armory, the reason they pump guns out the way they do is because, given the language in Heller, any weapons that are in just massive lawful ownership are constitutionally protected.
So their idea was everybody needs to have an AR and everybody needs a 30-round mag because then it's protected.
Yeah. So, and let's see. And this talks about essentially if California residents had access to some effective means of self-defense in the home, then Heller was satisfied and the state could ban and regulate almost anything. But I guess the question is what does effective means mean? And Phil, have you been tracking on all this?
I mean, not super close because I try my best not to get too involved in California gun laws because my blood pressure is a thing and I'd like to live long enough to see 45 if at all humanly possible. So I try not to. However, see, I'm just optimistic enough about this to think that maybe some good will come of it, but I'm still cynical enough to think that there's no way on earth they'll actually rule the way they should. I go back to the idea, though, that if the Second Amendment is a thing, and it kind of is, then shouldn't the ability to regulate firearms be beyond the government's reach in any case? Yes. Like the argument that, well, we didn't ban all guns, we just banned everything but this one kind of gun that shoots 22 LR, it's a single shot, so you still have a way to have a gun, so we haven't infringed on your right. It's a dishonest, stupid argument to begin with. The form of scrutiny required to look at a proposed infringement against constitutional right is not, did we infringe upon everything but this one aspect we let you keep? It is, can we prove beyond a shadow of a doubt we had no method other than this thing we imposed to protect the public and still pay homage to this right? And that's not happening in California when it comes to gun rights. They look at the situation as long as we left you with one option, then we haven't broken the rules. And it's ignorance.
Well, they're arguing it as a public safety measure. So that's the thing, is you end up with this public safety conversation all the time. And by the way, as gun advocates, we get dragged into it all the time. I see people fall for it constantly about which cartridge is more powerful or how many rounds you really need to defend yourself. And I think the problem is it's framed completely wrong. You're having the wrong argument, because people are like, oh, well, it's safer this way or safer that way. And the answer isn't, well, no, this is safer, that's safer. The answer is, nuts to you, it's a human right. Like in this country, especially, it is enshrined as a human right, up there with, voting and, life, liberty. Like it's not in the same category as, say, what you said earlier, speed limit, where we negotiate a speed limit based on available technology, average driver, and how many people die at certain speeds. Right. That's a negotiation of a public safety issue. If we had an enshrined right that said you can floor it till you die, well, then that would be a right. But we don't have that because it didn't come down as a natural human and need.
Well, here's my thing, though. Do we even need to get to the right? Because that's question 2 in analyzing a federal act. The first question is, where's the federal power to do the thing?
Oh, back around to the first.
Right?
Thing.
Yep.
So I don't even want to talk about the Second Amendment. Show me where, in Article 1, you have the right to regulate individual intrastate conduct. Show me. Then we can talk about the Second Amendment. But no one wants to have those conversations. They want to jump right into the Second Amendment and, doing it violence, butchering it. But I want to take a step back and say, show me in these powers, which are few and defined, where you have the ability to come into my house where I have affected nobody but myself and take something that I purchased away.
And see, I'm the one that usually makes other firearms owners very nervous, because when somebody brings up the whole, this gun's dangerous, my response is a wholehearted big grin on face. Yeah, they are. They're all freaking dangerous, dumbass. That's the point. Sorry, Sean, I'm not supposed to curse on this show, but I do every now and then, especially when I've been drinking.
It's Friday.
But the flat fact of the matter is, yes, guns are damn dangerous. That's the whole point. We weren't, the right to keep arms wasn't enshrined so we could go hunting. It wasn't enshrined so we could go 3-gunning and sport shooting and shoot clays and go be fuds. That's not the freaking point. The point was to be able to defend ourselves against tyranny and against infringements against ourselves and our property, period, end discussion. That's the reason. Yes, guns are dangerous. Making them less dangerous is a freaking fool's errand. It's no different than trying to reduce crime by reducing guns. The two are not linked together. And even if they were, it doesn't freaking matter.
Right.
The right to defend oneself is a natural right. And to remove the right to defend yourself from the equation is basically saying that your ability to maintain your own life, which we ought to all be able to agree is your most precious natural right. That right is contingent upon how much value the government places on your life, because it's your ability to defend your life. And it's like I've said before we're going to have a conversation about gun control, we're going to have a conversation about putting a police officer out there in that front yard to guard me and my family 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at my beck and call. Because until we have that conversation, and I don't want to live in that world, we're not having a conversation about taking the guns out of this house to defend my family.
Now, Matt, if you go back to what you were just saying about that conversation, stuff like the Kansas suppressor case that was
thank you
not put forward by or not heard by the Supreme Court, that just disappears. Like, it's not even a thing.
So, I'm with you guys 100%. But I'm going to say something unpopular, though. That was the wrong case. That case the facts were all messed up. He admitted to acquiring it in an interstate transfer. There's going to be a case where we can go after suppressor registration, where we can go after this stuff, but it's got to be one that we can win, and one where somebody was, admitted all this stuff, to knowing a violation was of the NFA, is not the right one to bring. That said, his rights were certainly violated because, again, I don't believe that his transaction involved anything interstate. I don't believe his transaction involved any person aside from himself. And I don't believe that there is anything about a whisper pickle that is so inherently problematic that justifies locking a human being in a cage. So,
yeah. Next story. FBI says March NICS checks substantially beat the previous record. This is from the No Duh files.
Yes.
3.7 million checks were performed in March, which is the most recorded checks since the National Instant Check System began in 1998. those are not the adjusted numbers, and the adjusted numbers basically take out the states. It was like Illinois that runs everyone who has a concealed carry permit through, or a FOID card, through the NICS database every time. But I think it was over 2.5 million firearms, something like that. It's not a huge surprise. I constantly say, we never have to convince people that guns are the answer. We just have to convince people that no one is there to protect them, and that when push comes to shove, they're responsible for the safety of their family. They'll come to guns on their own. So this is not surprising. We have the unprecedented times going on, stay-at-home orders all over the place, a pandemic pushing across the country, and people got a little bit freaked out. I am a firearms dealer. I've had a bunch of people that never wanted a gun, never thought they wanted a gun, come to me and ask, can I buy a gun? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, everyone else is buying guns, so you're going to have to wait a little bit. But it's great. It's, a lot of people. And I figure if 1%, 5% of those people actually become interested in the Second Amendment because they got those guns when all bets were off, I think that's a good thing for us overall. A lot of them, they'll end up selling them later because they'll be like, you know what? I don't need this. But, if we can convert some of those people, I think that's a great thing. Phil, what are your thoughts? It's no big surprise, right?
Oh, no, this is definitely out of the no-dove files.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm like really hoping against hope is that I've heard the argument on more than one occasion recently that, like, with all these new gun owners, it's got to be a good thing, because this now means that there's always people had to go through background checks. A lot of these people had to deal with waiting periods. A lot of these people have had to fall victim to the gun control laws they may have supported in the past. And that's a good thing, because now they understand these are stupid laws that shouldn't be supporting. However, I'm enough of a cynic to think that a lot of these people who may have voted for gun control in the past, who've now been freaked out by these waiting periods and everything, I hope you learn from that experience, but I don't know that a lot of them will. I think when this emergency passes, like you said, a lot of those guns are going to wind up on secondhand store shelves. People like you and me are going to pick them up happily and give them good homes and adopt them. But I think a lot of these people are probably going to go right back to the stripes they had before, because if it took this to get you into the idea that you need to defend yourself, it's like I've said about prepping. I am jumping up and down, excited about the number of people who are finally excited about prepping, wanting to get a food stock, wanting to get a case of toilet paper, wanting to be able to take care of themselves for more than 2 weeks at a time without FEMA having to feed you. But if it took this to get you to prepping, we need to have a conversation about priorities. Like, you don't wait till there's an emergency to suddenly say, I need a Glock and I need 100 rounds. Damn it, you should have done that a while ago. You should be on your third AR and friggin' 5,000 rounds by now.
No, but we see that with health insurance and stuff too, where people are like, I got a car accident, I better go get car insurance. And you're like, well, it's a bit late. It's like they don't understand what insurance is.
Well, it's not just that. How many people driving around with their gas light on? It's indicative of
you remember what I said about natural selection, though? If we just stop screwing with natural selection and let the gas lights stay on until they run out of gas on the side of the road, maybe then they'll start to learn. But as long as we keep reminding them, hey, tap on the shoulder, your gas light's on, you need to take care of that. Hey, all these scary things are happening. You need to go get a gun to be able to protect your wife, kid from getting shot and stabbed in your house. As long as we keep doing that, they're not learning. And it sounds really malicious, but I'm tired of having the conversation where I tell people no one's coming to save you. The police are coming to draw a chalk line around your body and take a report. They're not going to be here to save you.
No, I think you should
do it, or it ain't going to happen.
You should always tell them, because the alternative is when they fail and they don't actually get eradicated from the gene pool or something to that degree, like when you don't have people actually going silent over their failures, like they fail, they feel the failure, and then they come back on the other side, a percentage of those are going to learn, which is what we're talking about now. People who became afraid, bought a gun, that some of them are going to learn and they're going to stick around. Whether it's enough to grow the culture or not, I don't know, because there's always guys that are going to die out and leave and blah. But what the better thing is to go ahead and keep tapping people and hope that it takes hold at least once, or even if it never takes hold, at least that sort of background radiation of this is the solution will stay there, because the first thing they're going to reach for, if you're not there telling them that there is a way, is they're going to demand that we all provide that way, which is what they'll do in their voting. What they'll do is they'll go and say the government, i.e. all these other taxpayers, need to provide for me. So when my tank runs empty, there needs to be a government service that shows up and fills up my tank, because that was unavoidable. And so what you need to do is remind them constantly, that was completely avoidable, and I told you before, and I'll tell you after. I will tell you as many times as I have to tell you so that you don't believe that was unavoidable. Because once they believe it's unavoidable, they'll make us all do it for them.
That also demands that a person have enough honesty within themselves to admit that they caused the problem that screwed them in the end.
Yeah, but that's why.
Unfortunately, I believe there's so much polarization in people these days. I don't know how many people like that can change their stripes.
There's one thing that we know for sure, though. So this is all pontificating on how people might view this. One thing has changed that's really significant in my opinion. The biggest proponents of gun control are the people who will sit there and tell you, I don't understand why you would ever buy a gun.
Oh, that's true.
Those people have been eradicated by their own fear now. Now there is going to be all these people, even if they turn around tomorrow and get rid of their guns, even if they put all the guns in a fire and burn them, they'll never be able to say again that they don't understand why you would own a gun. So I think that's pretty valuable.
Yeah.
Short memories.
Without question. All I know is Tiger King saved the country.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Let that come off of Netflix quickly.
I have not watched it. I don't think
I haven't either. I'm tired of hearing about it.
Hey, if anybody hasn't watched it, I have watched it. I'll tell you right now. Number one, Phil, if you're libertarian minded, you'll love it very much, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, you should watch it with friends. Do not watch it alone, because alone it's voyeuristic. With friends, you just trust me. I watched it with a group of my friends on our Discord server.
Okay, I was like social distancing, man.
Yeah, no. Like we streamed it amongst ourselves,
okay,
and everybody. It's something that it's water cooler is what it is, but there's no water cooler, so it's kind of a bad time to watch it by yourself. Yeah. But if you can watch it with a couple friends remotely, maybe time hitting play or whatever, it's really funny with friends.
It was. I was in one of those, and it was outstanding.
Yeah,
it was a great group activity.
Yeah,
was it like Idiocracy converted into a series?
Yeah. So the problem is everybody tries to peg it down, and if you want a bird's eye view, first of all, I'm not going to tell you that's amazing because it's what everybody does, and that ruins everything. I think it's worth watching. It is uniquely entertaining in a different way than most things I have seen. Yes, it is a lot like reality television, but it's not. It doesn't reek of scripting or anything like that. It is heavily edited for bias, but they change the bias between each episode. So basically, they're taking a facet this episode, a facet that episode, and they keep kind of turning their way around the story as they progress the story. So it's like a man walking in a line with a camera slowly circling him. And you get to see a lot of the sides of the story, and you get to go through the story. And in the end, you're very aware that it's highly edited and salacious, but the characters are so fascinating that you are entertained. You are definitely entertained.
I probably will watch it, but we've been busy watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe in order from start to finish. We finished last night. It was amazing.
Oh, then you have no taste, and we have nothing to worry
about. Okay, whatever, Othias. Washington gun store owners ignore the governor and stay open. This came out on April 6th. This is it's a local gun store, Linwood Gun and Ammunition. They were caught off guard by the order by the governor. What is it, Jay Inslee? And they were caught off guard by the order. She said she didn't get a notice from the governor's office or even any state, county, or city agency. She learned about the shutdown order from a customer. And she did look at the Department of Homeland Security guidance, which lists gun shops and firearms dealers as essential. And they're going to stay open until they're shut down. I haven't heard anything else yet. I imagine Inslee will shut them down, but I don't know. Oatman and the law, dude. What do you guys think?
Aren't these your favorite people?
Yeah. And guys, if this happens, fpchotline.org. We're looking for anyone who's been affected by
it. Say it slower.
fpchotline.org.
That's Foxtrot Papa Charlie.
Yeah. We've been suing like a lot about these COVID-19 things, and it's been really rewarding and really effective. So
who would you say is the most litigious of all the pro-gun groups?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that there's a certain group that people could donate their money or time or anything to?
I would.
Yeah.
I would. And I would describe
and
the
that group would take that and translate it into
lawsuits.
Boots on the ground efforts to preserve. Is there a group like that?
I think there is.
Do they have fancy suits? Do they have a marketing department?
He's wearing a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I want to point out they've cannibalized my marketing department to some degree.
We use the same editor, which is fun.
So,
we're FPC's are really, we're just a bunch of hardcore dudes. I describe our legal department as frothing. small but frothing. And I mean,
conservative on their funding too. Like if you would like to stretch your dollar for donation and you like this sort of thing, having known them personally, I don't think you guys toot that horn enough.
Well, because it's something that I just believe in the nonprofit world. I think wasting money is the most disgusting thing. So when I have to go on work trips, I eat McDonald's. Like that's just how I believe a nonprofit should run. But and if you're interested in those bump stock case too, we've got bumpstockcase.com, everything at firearmspolicy.org. We keep it all updated there.
But if you are a gun shop and you are experiencing a problem under these sort of measures, please do contact them.
We want to sue them.
I'm hoping that I get shut down. I'll be like, hey guys, Adam, Matt, what's up?
Yeah, call us up, man.
Seriously, tell them, what is your number one problem with getting these cases?
The number one problem is, so like gun shops, they just don't want to step outside of their comfort zone. They don't want to, they just want to bend right over.
Well, to be fair, the government comes in hard.
Right. No, they do, and it's horrifying. It's terrifying. But like even when they're not coming in hard, it's like we were talking about earlier. There's this belief that so let's say the actual sphere of the law is this. There's a belief that it's here. And so then we see people complying before it actually gets to them. And so then they're out of the game, and they're not a good plaintiff anymore. So people just not speaking up and saying something when it starts to happen is the biggest source of problem. It's so hard to find plaintiffs who are willing and just who are willing to say when there's a clear violation, all right, we're gonna take this road. I'm not gonna say there's no risks, right? In fact, it's massively risky, but that's the biggest problem is finding people who've been violated to actually stand up and say, I've been violated and I want to do something.
It helps a lot with the case for them to, from the beginning, said, this is my right, no.
Well, it helps the most to have spoken to a lawyer from the beginning. Right. Because then...
but the point is not give ground, and then go get a lawyer. And then the idea is right from the start, be like, I'm going to go call up FPC or whoever. And get
if something feels weird, if something just feels wrong, it's probably wrong. So it doesn't hurt you to call. It doesn't hurt you to just email, and see what's up. It might be that something really wild is happening to you, and they might have only done it to 100 people. But if we don't hear from somebody, they're just going to get away with it.
Oh, that's the other thing is people suspect everything.
Yeah. It's it couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
So, Bill, were you surprised to see a Washington gun store? I mean, Washington historically getting trampled on constantly, right? Like a Washington gun dealer staying open against Jay Inslee, the governor. I mean, that's pretty crazy, right?
I figured you got to have a little bit of brass in shorts if you're going to operate a gun store in Washington State in the first place. I mean, you are sticking your head in the lion's mouth and checking to see if he's lost lately. I'm proud of you for that one.
Yeah.
For not just packing up and moving to Texas like most people would do. But I mean, honestly, I go back to the same point that Matt has raised several times. It's like, if someone explain to me why the government at any level has the ability or the authority to force private businesses to shut down for any reason. And it's the conversation I had on my show recently. I had a Tyler Lindholm, who's a Wyoming state representative. He's the narrator on the book I published, which is how he and I got to meet each other. And he's a hardcore libertarian. And because he operates in the political sphere, he's very, very knowledgeable. And we had him on the show and asked him, before we even have a conversation about what's an appropriate response to this pandemic, can we have a conversation about where does the government derive the power to do all these things? And he was kind of in our boat. I don't understand how they can in a lot of these cases. It's a completely separate conversation from what's necessary or what's appropriate. Do you have the authority to do this? Well, for the state to say gun stores closed down for any reason, I cock my eyebrow and I say, do you even have the authority to do that?
Yeah, I think we got to name it. We got to figure out a name for this thing, which is the wave of believing that they have the authority and therefore they do. You're almost like, it's almost
the police superpower.
It's like Terry Pratchett rules for gods. If everybody believes in them, they exist.
Yeah.
So you've sort of you've created something out of pure belief, and there's no real backing for it.
So it's questionable whether curfews at all are constitutional. That's an open question that hasn't got to the Supreme Court. Because guess what? They're not litigated that often. But now we've got everyone everywhere effectuating a curfew on randomly different parts of the population. I mean, that doesn't sound like equal protection to me. I don't know about you. So like that's one question is that people aren't asking, because if you ask this question, you get called a COVID denier or whatever. I'm not denying the seriousness of the problem, right? But it's an open question whether the government can order anyone to shut down at all, right? Not even getting to the exercise of the fundamental right question. Do they have this power? It's like I always say, do they have the power to do that? States have a lot more power than the feds, but I don't know if you can just say, no, don't be a person anymore because you don't work in XYZ.
I mean, all I'm saying is show me in our nation's founding documents where that power exists, and we can have a conversation about whether or not it should. But we can't even get to step one, like you said earlier, to even ask, do you have the power to do this?
We're paying people to do it, so we must be able to.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean,
we wouldn't have hired those guys if we couldn't do it.
But we have thugs that close the stores, so we can do it.
Well, I don't know what the appropriate term for it is. It's almost like these people think they got a golden ticket in a chocolate bar and they can just do no wrong at this point. Like whatever power I think I have, I do have. I mean, hell, I don't live in New Orleans, thank God, but the mayor right down here in New Orleans tried to grant herself the power to ban the sale and the transportation of firearms because of COVID-19. The transportation of firearms. And someone asked me why I was so upset about that. I'm like, you don't understand. Transportation is a legal term. Like it's a legal term. There is language where you can define within the legal sphere what transportation means. I can't take a firearm and put it in my vehicle and drive down the street with it, according to what she's saying, which is a direct violation of state constitution. I can't technically put a firearm in my holster with a concealed carry permit and walk around the block. I'm in violation of her edict. That the power she granted herself because she's the mayor and they can do that.
Hey, Sean.
It's worrying.
I'm really sorry I let all these libertarians on your show.
Are you kidding me? Like, this is the best. This is my favorite show that I actually might even continue hosting the show now. Because I'm having so much fun.
To be fair, y'all can blame Ben for me because he's the one who invited me.
No, I really enjoy it. Like,
I invited both of us. That was a bad call.
This is what I want. Like this is fantastic. Don't apologize for perfection. What you guys are talking about is like the FUD-geist, and like not FUD as in like the old dude wearing the safety vest. Like
FUD-geist.
I like that.
It's the fear, uncertainty, and doubt zeitgeist. It's like
the FUD lore about old guns. Mm-hmm. But now it's I could go with FUD-geist. We did it.
Yeah, you coined it. You've done it.
Boom, what's up? Thanks. I've been thinking about the whole show. I was like, I want to contribute something. And also, for the record, I just donated $50 to the Firearms Policy Coalition. So
thank you, man.
I recommend everyone else out there.
Sandwich.
Go do that right now.
We can use that to sue somebody.
Yeah. Let's keep talking about stuff like this. Ohio Gun Store is actually offering text ordering and curbside delivery. So this is one of the positive things.
Brad.
Sorry, this story comes from NRAfamily.org, but this is a Blackwing Shooting Center, and they're doing just that. I think that's awesome. I think this is how life should be in general. What do you guys think? I'll starting with Matt and Othias.
Well, I think that I have a new investment opportunity. Now, we're going to need to decommission Wendy's. And we're going to need a cashier at the first window.
Okay.
And the second window, we're going to stretch into a 50-yard lane. So you get your gun and ammo at the first window, and then you drive up to the second window, and that's when you can test fire. So you just boom, 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 boom. And then as long as you're fine, you're off you go. If you got anything else, you got to go all the way around. I got 2 windows.
Yeah.
If you decide to franchise that, holler at me.
Okay.
Right? I'm in.
Well, we'll call it the drive-by.
Now, total sidebar, we have these things called drive-through daiquiri shops down here. We can open up a drive-through daiquiri shop and drive-through gun store side by side just to make people go crazy.
I just figured out what state he's in because I have been there. And that's everywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, when I did say right by New Orleans, I figured that would have been the hint.
I didn't even hear New Orleans earlier, but that was the most striking thing about Louisiana. Was like, May came back and was like, we got daiquiris. What? And she's like, from the drive-thru.
I can always tell I've met somebody from like that hasn't been down here very long when I mention drive-through daiquiri shops, and I get the most perfect, honest, brain-locked look on their face. Just it's almost like a stroke, but the one side of their face doesn't slide down. Like you can tell that all conscious thought has ceased between their ears because they can't put the words daiquiri and drive-through together in a hyphenated or otherwise.
If it makes you feel any better, you know who was with her when they did this? Because they went in a separate car.
Who?
Curator of Springfield National Historic Site.
Okay.
Just her and I we found daiquiris.
That's awesome.
That is actually wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about a topic. There's multiple stories about this, but what about a lot of criminals being let free because of coronavirus concerns, and then we see like people. Brighton, he was detained for 10 minutes, not actually arrested, but we see things like that happening. Like what is going on? And Texas judges, and they're actually some pretty harsh criminals that they're letting free because of this stuff. Where does like public good overcome, like removing these prisoners from a place where they're probably just going to get coronavirus? I don't know even where I come down on this, and I'll start with Matthias and Matt. What do you guys think about this?
I mean, I think
this gets complicated.
Right, this gets pretty complicated because when you back up, you're like, why are they so overcrowded in the first place? Oh, it's because we've been locking in cages for stupid garbage all these years. So, you put yourself in the stupid position, state, and you have to provide for these people's safety. Now you're in a stupid position.
Actually,
you have to do something.
I have a weirder question because they're releasing all these guys. Where do all of them have somewhere to go that is safer than the prison?
That's another question.
Just in sense of the custodianship of that person.
Right.
And then if it's a nonviolent offender, is there any way you can do a deferment and just say you're a nonviolent offender?
Like
you have to serve can we put you on probation? Can we put you on all that's I mean, heck, if it's especially like anything in white anything in which you have some level of trust.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, look, you're not a threat to someone else. You're in violation of whatever. First of all, I have doubts about why you should be there to begin with. Right. But even so, can you not say, okay, well, you're furloughed, come back to prison later? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And I feel like we never have that gray area talk. We either do or don't do, and that's all we ever do.
Well, it's because people disagree on the theory of punishment.
Right.
Right. Like, are we rehabilitating them? Are we punishing them? Or are we, disincentivizing future crime? That's when all of this is so murky and broken, you wind up with weird problems like this. And guess what? When you get a weird problem, there's no pretty way to fix it.
Yeah.
Bill, what are your thoughts here?
This is going to be a little bit long-winded. A friend of mine,
really,
a friend of mine is actually writing like a modern-day philosophy book centered around libertarianism, trying to explain in more than just the taxation is theft meme, like what is libertarianism, why it is the appropriate solution to a lot of the problems we face. And he and I got into a very, very deep discussion about exactly what we're talking about whether or not prison is rehabilitation or punishment. And his standpoint, which is honestly makes more sense than anything to me, is neither. The whole point of prison is to exile a person from society so that they are no longer able to cause injury to other people. Like if a person has committed a violent crime, they've indicated that they are unable to exist in polite society and they are liable to infringe upon the life or the liberty or destroy the property of another person. So to prevent that from happening again for a period of time, we exile them from society. And because we haven't gotten to the escape from New York point where we can just make an island and stick them all on it and leave them alone, which would be cool.
Don't make fun of Australia.
Make a new Australia.
I'm not making fun. I think it was a great idea. But in any case, since we're not
they bleed and then you're born innocent. You should neuter them and put them on an island.
But since we're not at that point yet, that's the argument that makes the most sense to me, is that we're not rehabilitating in prison is a joke, because we can look at our recidivism rates for violent crime. No, that's crap. The recidivism rates for nonviolent crime, however, is fairly low, which is a really good argument for should those people even be in prison in the first place if they're not likely to commit a violent crime because they were nonviolent offenders in the first place. Like there's no need to remove them from society because they're not hurting anybody. The only thing liable to be harmed by a pothead is a bag of Cheetos. So I don't think we should be putting people that commit nonviolent crimes in prison. I think there are other ways to deal with, if we should deal with anything regarding that. I don't think we should. Final thought on prison, and that I'm stealing that shamelessly from a friend of mine who I won't name.
Yeah,
it puts me on the track to think in terms of. I think now we're arguing a philosophy,
right?
But I think at its core, he's not wrong in the sense that I would say that a lot of what we see prison as is sort of the enforcement of breaking the social contract, like the consequences of having broken the social contract. And we've added so many layers on it that we got into misdemeanor and felony and all this other stuff. But really, if you think about it, there's sort of these transactional things that we get upset about, where it's like you didn't pay taxes or whatever it is, and we're gonna get you for this thing and put you in prison.
Right.
But then there's also the things where you actually harm other people, so you violate their rights.
Right.
I almost wonder if you couldn't. And again, I'm spitballing. But I almost wonder if that's almost just a form of insanity at that point. Because you see people once they've committed that kind of act, they're far more likely to just be that kind of person that can commit that act. Like it's a threshold of some sort.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about releasing prisons, that's the actual topic, I feel like most of us feel pretty safe with non-violent felons around. And most of us feel pretty uncomfortable about having violent felons turned loose,
right? Because
we're not sure. We want a case-by-case example of who's being turned loose and why.
Well, that's the thing is a lot of these people, like some of the examples are a guy who was trying to rob a taxi cab driver and ended up firing a gunshot. Didn't hurt anybody, didn't kill anybody, but that's not somebody I really think I want released. Another one was someone that actually did shoot another individual. They didn't die, but still, like
right.
You know, these are the kind of people that they're releasing in these situations. And I'm like, these are not the ones that I want released. You know, if it's like tax fraud or, you know, like business stuff, like who cares? Drugs. Like, I don't really care about that at all. Like release them. They shouldn't be in jail in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Here's one thing that we always forget about. People always talk about felon. At the common law, we had 8 felonies and there was no like nonviolent one. They were all involved you doing horrible things.
Right. You either violated somebody's rights or it was a civil matter.
Right. And so like the only reason we put people in jail, I mean, really, if you want to back out and go theoretical about the law, the only reason we put people in jail is because they don't respond to financial incentives, because there are certain people who you just can't take money from.
Which again, probably an insanity kind of thing.
Exactly. So I think you're right. And if we put people in prison because they need to be exiled, well, then the natural follow-up question is, okay, well, then why is the dude who got a lobster that was too small there, right? So if we don't agree on a philosophy of prison, it's going to look really stupid.
I saw that comment pop up, by the way.
Yeah. Tony Simon said just because a person was convicted of a nonviolent crime doesn't mean they aren't violent. It means that it wasn't a crime it means that
it could be a violent person who is convicted for a nonviolent crime.
Right. Yeah.
But the same argument also cuts towards anybody that has been convicted of anything. They could have committed a violent crime and not been caught.
The unfortunate thing is the problem with that argument. And by the way, hi Tony, how you doing, buddy? The problem with that argument is going to be the only real indicator of violence is previous violence.
Right.
And if we don't have a conviction for violence and you're assumed innocent under the law, you are a non-violent offender in the eyes of the law.
Right.
You know. Now, whether or not we release somebody and then he does violence, unfortunately, we don't have a method for tracking that aside from creating a sort of pre-grill. Yeah. So that's the problem. Is like, yes, that can happen, but that doesn't protect their rights or any of ours in the same situation.
Yeah. So like, if you think red flag laws are a bunch of nonsense, well, then you should be very concerned if you hear yourself talking about, oh, well, who knows? They're just going to do this on another day or that.
Well, to be fair, I think he's talking about like pleading down to the charge.
Oh, yeah. So like there's also a countervailing tendency to overcharge in the beginning, so then they can offer you the carrot, right? Like a lot of times a prosecutor will know they can't get you for the max, but they'll try to pin it on you and then look at the sweet deal I gave you.
You know, if we keep this podcast going for about 4 more hours, we could fix the whole criminal justice system.
Yeah, I'll get right on it. So, family.
I did want to bring up.
I have to go.
I did want to go back to one thing you mentioned, though, Sean. The gentleman who was playing catch with his daughter and wound up getting arrested. Yeah. The gentleman who was paddle boating in the freaking Pacific and ended up with 5 police officers, showing up to arrest him because he was violating the stay-at-home orders. This is exactly what I told somebody the other day. I'm like, when I see that happen, when I see a man playing a catch with his child, and I can see myself doing the same thing in my own front yard, and he gets arrested in front of his child, I have a very visceral, emotional, aggravated reaction to that, because my point of view is like, you're going to tell me that me playing catch with my child is so freaking dangerous. You're going to take me, all these officers are going to respond, you're going to handle me ungloved without PPE, and possibly expose me to coronavirus, because God knows who you've been in contact with today. You're going to put me in a prison cell with several other people who I don't know what their status is as far as whether they've been exposed or not. Then you're going to release me home to my wife and child to possibly bring that virus, that, by the way, is super dangerous. That's why we're going through all this, back into my home to expose them because I was playing catch with my child. I have problems with all this. My BS detector goes off the scale at that point.
Well, there's so many problems. First, they didn't arrest him. So here's what happened. So in Colorado, we have a stay-at-home order signed by the governor as an executive order, which does become law temporarily until that executive order expires. So, but they are encouraging us pretty much daily to get outside and get some exercise and go to parks and hike and run and jog and things like that. And this park had a sign that basically said, closed except for groups of under 4 that are observing, any necessary social distancing orders. So they were there. That family was there. 3 people playing t-ball in the park, enjoying the sun, enjoying Colorado weather, was completely fine. The officers came up. We have a stop and identify law in Colorado, which means that for them to actually ask you for your identification, or for you to provide that identification, they have to have reasonable and articulable suspicion that you have committed a crime, are in the process of committing a crime, or are going to commit a crime. They had none of those things because they were completely there legally, according to pretty much every letter of the law that I've been able to find. So there was no reason for him to give his ID. He didn't give his ID. He didn't provide that for any reason. They did handcuff him and put him in the back of a police cruiser for 10 minutes. So it was an illegal detention. It was no longer a consensual meeting between those two. They actually moved into the investigative. And then I assume that someone in their chain of command finally realized that this was a terrible idea and that they had really made some mistakes. And they let him go and they let him free. And he went home with his wife and daughter. But at the same time, damage has been done. Civil rights have been violated. This is, I mean, if I was an attorney, I would assume, based on the things that I know and have learned, that this would be kind of a really good opportunity to make some money. And
the real problem there is why they felt it was necessary.
Right.
Like,
he wouldn't provide his ID, which is just absolutely ridiculous, especially in Colorado. I mean,
right into my will.
it's really, but see, it seems like, honestly, it feels like one of those pride situations.
It does. We get into that a lot when you talk about, this whole thing. I mean, there's tons of YouTube channels out there that talk about this stuff constantly, and I may or may not watch some of those and just try to learn from them. But they didn't have any reasonable or articulable suspicion that he was committing a crime. They told him to go home, and he didn't give them his ID, and it was an ego thing. 100%.
Yeah.
Had to have been.
And then, by the way, not to that degree, but we've all been drawn into feeling those sort of things where it's like, but I'm me, you know? And I think one of the things that you learn as you mature is how to let go of that and to be like, well, if there's no harm, why am I feeling this? You know, other than actually protecting yourself.
Right.
Especially if you're projecting onto somebody else. Why are you doing this? You know? And institutionally, why is this being allowed to happen? Which it sounds like it wasn't. It sounds like once somebody became aware of what was happening, they went, what are you doing? Stop doing that. Yeah. So...
Yeah, but when I see that kind of behavior and that kind of personality exhibited by law enforcement officers, my immediate assumption is there's something socially happening within that department that makes that behavior and that personality acceptable. Because if that was one cop who tended to overstep the bounds and everybody else was saying, dude, you are way out of line, he wouldn't be there for very long. So the fact that this had to get up to that level, where it was, whether it was a supervisor or so on and so forth, before somebody finally exercised common sense and said, let him go, the fact that it got that high tells me there's something going on in that department that makes this behavior acceptable. And it is not acceptable to stop and question and badger a citizen who is doing no harm. Right. I don't care. And the argument that if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind giving up your ID is BS.
Well, then that's
if I'm doing no harm, leave me the hell alone.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You have to go the other way. And I mean, I think you're completely right. And I don't think the question is whether the culture of that department allows that behavior. I think it's often more likely that it encourages it. And I've heard of people that get, like you were saying, there's the one bad egg that gets washed out. But then I've also heard of, in usually it's in larger areas, that the good egg gets boiled, So I don't know if there's a way to investigate the culture, right? And I'm sure it would be a huge change to do anything, but we do need to revisit cultures of these agencies, because a lot of them really do believe that they don't believe they are policing their community. They believe they're like occupying forces in a hostile area. And that's a cultural thing.
And the thing is that like I hate to ascribe motive to action. I don't want to make that charge, which is why I'm intentionally stopping short of they promote this behavior, but it's pretty obvious it's being permitted. No, because there's no way it's not being permitted because, like you said, the one bad egg would get flushed out of the bunch. I wouldn't have a person affiliated with like my podcast, my group, my inner circle who was wildly out of the bounds of the rest of us.
Yeah,
I just wouldn't because it makes us it makes me uncomfortable to be affiliated with that person.
Then he already said like how long has he been there?
Right.
What is this common? Blah blah blah. This could create questions that should be investigated.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't saying that I think this is what's happening. I'm saying that there's this broad spectrum of issues, and this could be anywhere on it. But the point is that I think what you're saying is right. That the fact that this happened shows that somewhere there's a failure.
Most of the guys in enforcement, and they'll work for one state or one city, and then they'll move over somewhere else and be like, "Oh my God, it's so much easier here. Right. The culture is different." Because at some level, most of them are working for an elected official, and so therefore the departments kind of reflect the area they're in more than people realize.
Right.
And so, like where I'm at, we know someone who's an officer, and he was talking to me about, no, we're bringing in this policy and this policy and this policy, and ever since the COVID thing, their policies are actually about lessening how much they're, I'd say harassing, but I'm saying that more like. We don't
interacting.
We're not going to, not even interacting, but they're doing things where it's like, we're not going to pull people over for this. We're not going to pull people over for that. And it's like, we're really whittling down what we're doing. And even a lot of the departments are pushing back on the elected officials and say, we're not going to enforce these things for like, any sort of idea of, locking people in their homes. They're like, no, we're not, that's not our job. And we're not doing it. You're not going to get us to do it. So there's always going to be guys that's like the culture is X or Y. And so I just don't want people thinking it's being applied universally. The fear is, in this one case, is this one guy who got a little proud?
Right.
Or is this indicative of some sort of abuse?
Right.
Well, what you have to do is you have to go look for other instances of this pride coming out. You know?
Yeah. There's a little bit of institutional stuff here because there was between 3 and 5 officers. It just so happened that like an ex-city councilman was there in the park also.
That's pride cultural.
Yeah, recording from a distance, like what in the hell are they doing? And but yeah, 3 to 5 officers. So I mean, this seems to me clearly institutional.
Yeah.
At the point you have multiple officers all signing off on this, you're losing the argument for maybe this is one bad apple, because if it was one bad apple, the other 2 would have slapped him in the back of the head and told him stop doing that.
Well, not necessarily, right? We have the bystander effect that's an actual thing, right? Like people don't want to be the stick in the mud when they're around their other people, right? Like
or their department might have a sort of a custodial thing where it's like, well, that's this guy's thing.
Right.
The most I can do is call the sergeant and wait. You know what I mean? Like maybe they were watching going, I can't tell him no because we're same rank. I got to go call Sarge. That's another thing that can happen.
See, on the one hand, this is one of the reasons I didn't go into law enforcement after I was enlisted. On the other hand, that argument cuts no weight with me because doing the right thing crosses policy.
No, it does.
If you have to do something obviously stupid and bullying to a citizen who's not harming anybody to follow policy, the policy is freaking wrong, and you ought to stand up for it.
Right. But they may have by going through their channel, because to do so directly in front of that guy might have caused a worse situation. I would like to know more about this, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, I mean, insofar as oath breaking is concerned, I mean, all lawyers take an oath to uphold the Constitution, right? There's also just a culture.
Yeah, but nobody trusts them.
There's a culture of just like ignoring the oath. So,
Yeah.
Although, just one more thing, Sean, and then I'll shut up and let you move forward.
No, man.
But this whole conversation is being had about like things that are going to be enforced and not going to be enforced, and how they're dialing down enforcement of these minor crimes and how they're doing all this. It really raises the question of why in the heck are y'all enforcing it in the first place if it's not that big of an issue that all of a sudden, now that we have a new situation, we're not enforcing it. I mean, it really begs the question, like, if you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to bust that guy for rolling the stop sign because it's not that big of a deal, then why'd you bust him 6 months ago when he was rolling the stop sign? If it was dangerous before, it's dangerous now, isn't it?
9/10 of it is Karen.
Oh, God.
It really, like, it's so weird because people get in the conspiracy of, like, monies and all this other stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's corruption, there's money, there's stuff like that. But I think 9/10 of what we see that we don't like is Karen, and it's just trying to get, and I'll tell you this as someone that has like a channel and everything, and I work with other people that are big creators or whatever, and I've seen guys get way up high and just come crashing down. I've seen whole pieces of entertainment that build up,
Right.
and we see with TV shows too. They'll build up, and then the next season will just go to just terrible quality crap, and the plots take weird tangents and stuff. And if you ever wonder what's going on, like why they just seem to suddenly go schizophrenic insane, is because the most dedicated people, the highest interacting people, will give you bad advice. And they're I say Karens because we all know what I'm talking about, because the manager thing. But it's this very vocal minority that over-engages, and the problem is when everybody else is content, they don't say anything. It's very, you don't often get, like, how many of you have written a letter to your politicians to say, I'm having a very nice day and everything seems to be fine. Thank you for doing what you did. Please don't do anything different. Like, who's ever written that letter, right? No. So they're constantly trying to figure out what they're supposed to do in this environment in which the sharpest spears are coming from this minority of people that try to affect control over their neighbors. Right. And so we just get poked in that direction. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, and actually, I'm so glad you brought that up. So the reason the police were in the park at all was because someone called in a group of 12 to 16 people that were not observing social distancing protocols.
Okay. That person
die in a fire.
Yeah. No, wait, what did you say?
Die in a fire.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say that hero deserves stomach cancer.
Yeah. I mean, whatever's more painful, I'm okay with.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we should, do physical harm to them. I'm just thinking like cutting the brake line a little bit and let nature take its course.
Well, it's like we had snow here for the first time in a decade. And over by the highways and stuff, we have these big embankments that are, hundreds of yards. You know what I mean? You're not near the highway. Right. It sounds like you are, but you're not.
Yeah.
And kids were sledding down them with parent supervision. And the police said that they were getting lit up by phone calls from people driving by going, they're out here sledding. And they're like, are they going in the road? No, they're nowhere near the road. Why are you calling me?
Oh.
But just over and over and over again. But they're sledding.
Because I want to have fun.
It sounds fun. Yeah. What are you worried about?
How dare they have fun?
They be there? Well, they're taxpayers, or at least the parents. It was weird. There's are there parents out there? Yeah, there's kids and adults. Okay, then shut up and go away, please.
But there's the law that says they can sled there.
But I'm not having fun, and they're having fun.
Well, and here's the thing: in Colorado Springs, we've actually had on all the news channels, newspapers, everything, that our 911 dispatchers are overloaded with calls about people complaining about other people not observing social distancing. And I'm like, oh my God, I literally.
Misery loves company.
Yeah, Thanos needs to snap those people out of existence.
That's the point at which I just want to friggin' buy 100 acres in the middle of nowhere, invite 30 or 40 of my closest, most tinfoil hat wearing friends, set up a little prepper commune, and say to hell with the rest of the world. We're gonna give anarchism a try right here by ourselves.
Communist.
Yeah, Phil's the next Branch Davidian leader.
Thanks, Sean. We know how that turned out, didn't we?
We're turning into the other show.
Yeah.
So. Because the gun control advocates are so bored right now, we are way over time. I know. I hope
hell with it.
But I'm just having fun.
Are we anywhere on the script anymore?
Yeah.
I don't even care.
The first two
we
items.
made 3 left turns off the script.
Every town lawyers are arguing that closing gun store. I'm sorry, that's not the right one. Where is it? They're talking about because of social distancing guidelines and the pandemic and everything. The ATF is not doing their gun store or their firearms dealer inspections, and they want them to do that, which is just crazy to me. They say that they should step up gun store inspections during the COVID-19 buying surge. So this is Kyle Ann Hunter, Vice President of Programs for the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence.
Let me speak directly to the Brady campaign for a minute. And I'm giving honest and real advice.
Please do.
Shut up. And don't remind the gun stores you're there, because every kitchen table FFL that's overloaded right now is probably screwing up some of their paperwork. Wait 3 to 6 months and then go get them if you really want to do this stupid plan, because that's when they're going to forget that they didn't get. No, as a matter of fact, wait at least 2 years, because the problem is you're going to go after them right now and you're going to be like, oh, you didn't have this guy sign here. Oh crap. Well, I'll go call him because it's been 3 days and he's right over there. Right? No, if you want to annoy a gun store, go after them 6 years into it. You know what I mean? Like when they have to be like, does he still live at this address? Crap. You know what I mean? That's when they get annoyed. They
don't need advice.
They think that they're striking in the middle of a panic and that's going to make it worse. And it's like,
right.
No, it really
just
won't.
Being annoying.
They'll be on the ball even, but you're making them do their homework better.
No, they go, I have to make copies of those. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brady.
Thanks, Brady campaign.
And like, so I've been reading and replying to a lot of this dog excrement that they've been putting out lately. And like, I feel like it's all written by first-year law students. It's so amazingly bad because guess what? Every single case they cite is in a first-year textbook. Like, it's weird. It's so bad. It's like they just had somebody write letters and like they didn't tell them what to do. Just go write a bunch of letters and they pick random topics to be wrong about. It's been unbelievable.
Well, here's the quote here. We don't know how gun dealers are acting. Groceries are still open, but the FDA is still open inspecting the food. Why aren't agents inspecting the gun stores?
They are.
Yeah, it's at the same rate they always were.
Yeah.
Are they? I mean,
I know somebody getting audited right now.
Oh, okay. So they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody knows somebody, right?
Yeah. I've known a few that went through some audits.
Yeah.
Like,
I know that they're doing new FFL interviews. They're doing those over the phone now, whereas my guy showed up in a hoodie and jeans. Doing it. So it's like no different. Like he could have done it over the phone easily. It didn't matter at all.
Did he have the black Impala?
I don't know. I didn't see what he was driving, but he walked by and I actually got a little bit on alert because he was just so casual. But I mean, it makes sense, you know. I didn't care. Like I didn't know. He's a good dude. He did his job, and I got approved. So whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of those guys are more into the guns than they are into laws.
Yeah.
I will say, having been having worked with the other FFLs that have been investigated for thefts and things like that, the IOIs, the actual ATF agents, like they're gun dudes. They're not jerks. They worked, all the ones that I've dealt with. I'm not saying that's 100%. It's like everything else, but they were gun people. They worked with everything, and they were not egregious in their in everything that they did.
Well, and a lot of times those investigators are not actually agents. Like
they're just investigators.
Yeah. So that, I mean, but anyway, I love my dog. Please leave me alone.
I don't even have a dog. Since I got an FFL, I put my dog down.
Oh, you
just preemptively.
Yeah, just like, you know what?
Losing a boating accident?
At least I won't miss.
You lost your dog in a boating.
He fell off.
Where's your dog? We know there's a dog.
Oh man! All right, let's wrap this up, guys. It's been super fun. Phil, what have you been up to, and where can people find you online?
We're still doing our usual thing, man. MOFpodcast.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. I've been making shit posting memes ever since before the coronavirus started because I got bored, and no one should ever allow me to get bored. But you know, I mean, when this first started, I noticed a couple of podcasts that I follow. They made comments that like there was a slight disruption because of, you know, various things with the shelter-in-place laws, and they were trying to figure it out. I came out and put up did a live stream on our page and said, we've been here for 3.5 years. We're still here. We're going to stick around. I mean, this is the time when the message about prepping and about self-reliance and about being able to protect yourself and take care of yourself, this is when it needs to be heard. And I saw one person in the chat who I believe is actually in my group. He made the comment that he's always been a gun guy, but he only recently came into prepping. I'm going to tell you that if you own a gun for self-protection, you're a prepper and you don't even realize it yet. Like, why do you own a gun to protect yourself if statistically you're liable to go to your grave and never having used it in anger?
I was thinking you own a fire extinguisher.
Yeah. But I guess that's my point. I tell people all the time, we talk prepping, but we don't get into like the zombie apocalypse, really wacky stuff very often, unless it's tongue in cheek. Well, every now and then it's fun.
A little. Well, the problem is prepping gets mixed with a hero complex, and it's a different thing if you're doing it sincerely.
Yeah, but the majority of the time we spend talking about prepping, we're talking about everyday emergencies: hurricanes, floods, blizzards, job loss, freaking economic downturns, hyperinflation. We talk about things that happen. Just because they don't happen to you every day doesn't mean they don't happen every day to somebody.
Well, people used to think that way,
right?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, there's a whole bunch more people thinking about it today than there were 60 days ago.
Oh yeah, once the toilet paper runs out,
yeah, people start freaking out. They hate that.
I don't even know why the hell toilet paper got so thin on the shelf.
Dude, I got into a fight about toilet paper a week before it disappeared.
No, so Othais, you actually had some good shit to say about. Geez, what show am I? hold on.
Full entendre.
You got me, and you think you're on the other one now.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, you said you were talking about just-in-time manufacturing and all that, and I was like,
Oh yeah,
You've been on that.
yeah. The problem is everybody freaked out about toilet paper, and then I saw memes everywhere about why is everybody buying all the toilet paper. They weren't. If you go to the grocery store and purchase, let's say on average, everybody combined hit the grocery store for 20% more groceries in a week than they normally would. Well, everything's just-in-time manufacturing and just-in-time delivery now because carrying inventory is rough.
Mm-hmm.
And so especially something like a grocery store, and actually afterwards I talked to some people that said I stock at a grocery store, and yes, the paper goods, there's almost never any in the back because they take up so much space. We get in what we get in, we put it onto the shelf, and computers track how much our community consumes, and there's like a 5% margin at best.
Right.
So if you come in there with 20% more demand or 50% more demand or whatever, that toilet paper is going to get smoked before the canned goods do because you can have a little more of those in stock. Right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it's also a pain to transport because they take up a ton of space. They don't pack down for their unit cost. Mm-hmm. And so they always run sort of minimal on that. Yeah. So really the toilet paper ran out because it was the most minimally overstocked thing in the grocery store. But then once people saw it ran out, then they bought even more. Right. And again, since it's never really stocked, it's a just-in-time manufacturing. So now they're trying to crank up manufacture and delivery, but it's a mess.
You believe there's a shortage, so you wind up with the 22LR problem. Anyone who lived through 2000.
22LR, when 22LR became Beanie Babies for old white guys. So,
well, I guess my point was more along the lines of not like I get the whole just-in-time manufacturing thing. I guess my thought process
was leading me because I want to reinforce your point. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I guess my thought was more like, are there that many people that didn't have toilet paper on the shelf when this all started? Because
they didn't have it in their room, and I had this. So Sean actually heard this argument from me. Is in my home, it was like someone would just grab a couple rolls whenever we were out, and there's one member of my household that I'm not outing, but they would always be like when it was their turn to grab the toilet paper, they would grab like 6 rolls. And like when it was, the other one's turn to grab the toilet paper, they might buy 12. But whenever it's my turn to buy toilet paper, I'd be like, I'm gonna get like one of these things. Yeah. I'm just gonna. And so there was this one thing where we ran out of toilet paper again because whenever it's 6-roll person's time, we always ran out of toilet paper. And so I was just like, I'm tired. And one of them was going out. And I was like, just buy 30 friggin' roll. I want all the toilet paper. Mm-hmm. And they're like, that's stupid. So then she decided she was going to show me, and she bought like 50 rolls of toilet paper. And 5 days later, everybody ran out of toilet paper. And she was just like, the one time I punished him by filling the thing with toilet, to annoy me, she piled up in front of the door just so that I could look at it. And then at like 5 days later, I was just like, I'm the king of toilet paper.
This has got to, never mind. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to get you in trouble. But
all I'll say is people used to make fun of me for having a bidet.
Funny story. A week before everything went down, I ordered a bidet off Amazon. And right now, clean butt.
You know the difference between genius and crazy person is? Situation.
But the point being, though, is people laugh at prepping because of the people that had the hero complex about it. But if you take out the hero complex, when you look around, we don't have a lot of inventory in the system like people think we do.
Nope.
Because we're just in time now. We've become very efficient.
Yeah.
And so you have to be the stockpile point because the grocery store is not stockpiling. They think there's a magic back room full of everything. And it's really not. Like modern grocery stores barely have that storage anymore. It's more of an unloading bay. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to have reserves, you have to have reserves. And that's a forward-thinking decision. Mm-hmm. And it's just like people don't put money in savings. Like it's hard for people to think about the possibility of risk, So it's tricky.
Yeah. Matthias, where can people find all the stuff that you are up to and your website, videos?
Yeah, I do gun history, and I don't talk about politics on there. So this is always a risky click for me. But it's C and Arsenal, Charlie and Romeo Arsenal. I don't know. Look up some World War I guns. You'll find me. Yeah.
It's so clever, but just awful.
Oh, it's unspellable.
It's great.
It's good though. It's like an IQ test to keep some of the people out of my comments.
Mm-hmm. That's honestly pretty good. All right, go check that out. And Matt, where can people find all the stuff that you guys are up to?
Well, yeah, I'm from Firearms Policy Coalition. You can go to firearmspolicy.org. You can also catch me on Twitter at MATTLA @law. Matt Law at Law. I thought it was clever.
Yeah, you can't spell it.
Yeah.
Bob blah blah's law blog now.
Yeah. But so everything's there tabbed on the site. I do a weekly roundup of all the news that goes on YouTube as well. But yeah, you can check out everything we're doing there.
And I want to challenge everybody. I just donated $50 to the Firearms Policy Coalition. I will show you right now on the screen if you're actually watching, just so you know that I'm telling the truth.
I want to see the last four of the credit card number.
Yep, just the address, which is I'm an FFL, so it's public anyway. I don't care. But I want to challenge everybody out there. Go donate to the FPC, Firearms Policy Coalition. That is what's the website, Matt?
Firearmspolicy.org.
There you go. Go there. Donate. If you send to Sean@firearmsradio.tv your receipt of donating to the FPC, I will send you Firearms Radio Network swag. So email that. You'll get stickers, whatever else that I have in the coffer. In the mail.
Give you stickers? Do you get stickers for that? I got some.
Yeah, we I can get stickers.
Email Matt if you want stickers.
Oh God! No.
They're also providing a decoy dog for you to leave in your living room in case the ATF shows up. But that's $49.99.
Yeah, it may or may not have a cavity the exact size of a jar of tannerite. But go to fbcgear.com. We've got stickers and swag and shirts and everything. And guys, thank you so much for your support, man. You know, we're a fast-moving, lightweight organization. So really, like, the more that's in our coffers, that we just start suing. So it's an amazing, huge help.
You're getting a lawsuit. You're getting a lawsuit.
All right, that's awesome. Check out Patriot Patch Company and Second Call Defense, firearmsradio.tv/SCD and patriotpatch.co. Donate to the Firearms Policy Coalition and get some swag from the FRN. And I guess that's it. That'll do. We'll talk to you next week. And thank you guys very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast. Pushing the root, poking the root.